Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia, and today, for the very first time, I am finally reacting to Queensryche with their song Take Hold of the Flame. This is the live in Tokyo 1984 version. Let's get into it.
This next song is off our new album coming out soon. It's a song of hope. It's called Take Hold of the Flame.
What the hell? Okay, so I was already getting ready to lose it over how beautiful his vibrato is. It's so even and full, and there's so much color in his tone just because of the way that he's approaching a lot of his vowels. I was not expecting range to already be like just going off. We're a minute and 21 seconds in. Where is it gonna build? Oh god, where's it gonna build? Oh no, I'm excited. Okay. Anyway, let's just do a quick pitch check because that felt high. Let's just check it. Oh, sorry, the vibrato is amazing. It's an interesting way that he's approaching the vowels. We're gonna talk about the vowel work later. I don't want to take up too much time now. We're just doing a pitch check. Okay, so A4. So not astronomically high on this first note, at least not if you're like talking basic tenor range. That A4 should be comfortably achievable. And then our second note, where do we lead? Okay, so it goes from this A4 and then it shoots up to this E5. So we're up in the 5th octave. We've pushed that range all the way up there. This is really exciting. I will talk about tonal differences at the end, I think, because otherwise it'll take up way too much time now. But as we go back and re-listen, you guys have probably already noticed that between that A4, which is beautiful, we got this regular vibrato going through it. It seems like quite a, not necessarily a super wide sound, but there's a lot of color and space to the sound. And then we get narrower and slightly more constricted. Constriction and compression, some words have more negative connotations. When I'm saying constrict, I just mean that that's what the muscles are doing in the back of the pharynx. They're not like choking him, or it's not like a boa constrictor where things just get tighter and tighter and tighter and it's a bad thing. In this way, constriction, I'm just referring to the actual action of those muscles. They are constricting that space, making it slightly more narrow for the second sound. Oh, I just wound up talking about it anyway, God. But we'll go back, we'll listen this E5, damn. I'm so excited for the rest of it, gee whiz. Okay, listening, A4, E5, let's keep going. you? Da. Just chilling up around a C5. Okay. You know how I mentioned before constriction? That's where that sound is sitting. So when he's up there, the reason it might sound not necessarily tight, but definitely narrower is because that's literally what's happening in his pharynx. His pharynx is tightening to give him those tonal qualities. He's not as connected through the vowel as he was in the very beginning, but I mean, that's kind of semi to be expected. And I also think style-wise, it sounds really good how he's approached his vocals up around this C5. It's very similar to the shape that he would have had to have made for that E5 earlier. So if you do happen to go back and re-listen, there may be some tonal consistencies between that E5 to where he's singing now. Let's just go back. Wow, every time I wanted to reach to pause, there was something else that was happening. So we've got those backup vocals there. They're just doing something super speech-based. It's as if you were just talking into the microphone. That's the basis of what they are doing. What our lead is doing, however, is he is coming out of that compression up around that like C5 melody as he starts to descend. So he's not holding on to tension, and that's super, super important if you want any kind of longevity with your sound. It can be very easy to carry tension from a particular note that you kind of semi-needed a little bit of tension to get to, and then to carry that into the rest of your singing. As he starts to descend through the melody, it relaxes a little more. We get some of that color coming back. So this to me is a very balanced kind of vocal approach because he knows what he has to do to comfortably get those notes up there. It doesn't sound like it's taxing him. Like at all to be up around there. I mean, we just heard him like punch out that E5 in the beginning, so I think a C5, you know, he can handle it. But then as he starts to descend, we get some of that color coming back. Another interesting point when he's up around that C5 is he starts to get a lot more movement in his jaw and in his body, but his physical energy has also changed. I don't know whether that's something that is helping him facilitate the vocal choices that he's making, or whether that is just incorporated into all of his physical actions as a performer, because sometimes you will do things for performance to keep the energy with the crowd just going. Sometimes you will make those choices that maybe aren't like the best for the voice box, for the larynx, for everything to stay chill there. But regardless, whatever it is, it's clear he's got the stamina for these for this kind of singing. But regardless, his voice still sounds pretty darn free, if I'm honest. There was one moment where he sustained in the vowel. I know earlier I mentioned he wasn't staying quite as vowel dominant. That was to do with the phrasing. So he was doing the short, punchier words where the vowel it wasn't a dominant part of the phrase. And then he did this sustain vowel. I want to go back and find it because we had this vibrato come back into it. Sounded so cool. Sailed through it. My goodness. That vibrato is even. Sometimes we can get a little bit of a hammer vibrato on voices that want to use tension in that way. There's no tension at all in that sound. It's like a suitable amount of compression for the kind of color that he wants in his voice up there, and that's kind of it. He's not overworking, or at least it doesn't sound like he's overworking. Now, if I try to demonstrate what it is that he's doing around that C5, it's not going to sound quite right on me as a female vocalist. I start to compress where he does a little bit higher, only because it's not as acceptable for female vocalists to have that kind of tone lowered down, whereas for a male vocalist, you know, you're pushing the limits of your range, you're starting to really move on up there. There are some acceptable timbres at different pitches for a male vocalist compared to a female vocalist. So if I'm there and I'm going, in order to create that sound, I'm slightly elevating my larynx. I'm pushing a lot of twang and some nasalized placement through that sound. And I am, in some ways, also locking my jaw just a little bit, moving into that sound because I do want that compression to be there. Now, you can achieve compression without necessarily doing anything with the jaw. And in fact, if the jaw is overly tense, that can get in the way of some good singing. But for me to create that kind of sound in that particular part of my voice, that's my approach for that. But regardless of how it sounds on a female voice or a male voice, one of the commonalities and something that female belters will use just as much as male belters, and in fact, if you're a contemporary vocalist and you're not using this, you're already putting yourself at risk if you're doing really heavy big sings, is we're using twang. And twang is an acoustic phenomena where the epiglottic fold is curved over slightly, creates that extra resonating cavity, which means that there's an extra space for the harmonics of your sound to be filtered through. And because we do have that extra space for harmonics to be strengthened or dampened depending on the size of the space, we start to get these brighter sounds through our singing. Something that I'm noticing that he is doing, we have the consistency of that twang tonality, but he'll shift things. The take hold of the is sitting a little bit more nasalized. You can still have a twangy sound that goes through the nasal cavity. And then when he goes to flame, that soft palate, that velum, is lifting so that he can propagate mostly through the oral cavity. And that's where we're getting all of this color from. The nasal cavity, as I've explained before, creates like a dulling effect. It dulls the sound quality, and by propagating through the mouth, he's able to release into this beautiful, colorful, even wonderful vibrato. But it doesn't sound weird because we've got that twang consistency as part of the tonal color there, guiding between the sounds. I mean, it also helps that the higher notes on take hold of that are fast, so there's less chance of you noticing any kind of tonal disparities. But still, that twang consistency through those two sounds allows us to feel like it's still cohesive within the phrase, and that jaw opening is going to give you some slightly different colors to your sound. So for him, that velum being up or down is going to change the timbre, but also how big is your mouth? What's going on there? That's going to influence your sound as well. So let's just keep going. Whoa. Okay, I gotta go back and re-listen to that because that sounded like two vocalists up around a similar area, which means they have not one crazy vocalist, but two. Let me hear that again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so not quite in the same tonality that the lead is, but still fairly high up. That's pretty cool. Where are you? Back up on that E5, you nut job. Okay, fine. And it's sustained too. Jeez. You also may notice that on that E5, his mouth, that jaw that I mentioned earlier, is really open. That one's not just to allow color and propagation through the mouth. That's also because the more that the jaw opens, the higher the frequency of the first formant gets. And just as a general rule, you don't want your first formant to be lower than the fundamental or the pitch that you're singing. It can start to feel really uncomfortable and you can run into some issues with like vocal power, like acoustic power, if that starts to happen. So with him being up on that E5, I am not surprised to see his mouth like really, really open. And the tone is clean. There's no tension in that sound. Wow. Let's keep going. He's having to do like a super fast vocal setup change between so take hold of the, so take hold up. That's where he's going. He's very speech-based, very first register on the so take and then hold of the flame. He's up in that really powerful mix again. So, you know, super fast vocal setup changes. Goodness, I would have just let the backup singers take care of that low note. Oh, wow. Super flexible voice being able to make those kinds of changes that quickly though. Okay. I'm assuming that last note on the... Yeah, he's back up on that E5. Okay, so we get hints of like range of where he wants to go right in the beginning. Takes you by surprise. It certainly took me by surprise. I was not expecting him to go up to an E5. Like within the first minute and a half of the song. That's insane. And then he would start to stay around that same area. He spent most of this song dominantly in the 5th octave. Dominantly. Without it sounding like it was causing him any tension, any loss of stamina, nothing. That is someone who is very comfortable, not just using their voice, but using it in a performance environment. Because sometimes that performance environment, you get like hyped on the emotion and the feeling, the connectivity, and you can start to over push. So he's clearly very comfortable. And his technique for what he's doing sounds so well balanced acoustically that I would love to hear what he would be like as an older vocalist. So that was in 1984. If you guys have any examples of him singing, whether it's this kind of stuff, whether it's related music, something, I'd be super curious to hear how that technique has progressed, because for what it's doing in this particular song, he has connected that acoustic setup between jaw and pharynx and compression and twang and placement is just It is so solid. This is a truly brilliant example of mixing and why you don't have to take up a heap of vocal fold mass in order to achieve a really powerful sound that wow. Something else that I really enjoyed that he did with these like little calling and almost like whoops and like hey, woo, like those kinds of things. They happened a couple of times coming out of some pretty high singing. Those are also things that can alleviate tension because you're bringing those vocal folds down. It's why when you warm down from singing, usually you start high and then you bring the vocal folds down. I have like a falling leaf exercise where it's like you imagine your voice is like a falling leaf moving all the way down into like the basement of your voice until you land on your vocal fry. Those kinds of like woo, like bringing the voice back down, hey, hey, those are things which make the vocal folds go from long and tense, because long thin vocal folds, they're under tension at that point. It's the same as with a guitar string. If you pull it tauter, it's going to be under greater tension. Same with the vocal folds. You're taking it from long and tense back down. You're allowing it to alleviate some of that tension that may have been building from being up around that C5 fifth octave forever. Wow. Probably the last thing that I just want to mention, because I feel like I broke down. I accidentally dived into some like acoustic voice nerdery in the middle of again. So I guess I don't really need to rehash it now. But one of the things that I absolutely adored was his vibrato. It was so free and so regular. Normally I hear things that err more on the side of a hammer vibrato in some of these styles, particular from female vocalists. We get that hammer vibrato a lot. His was beautifully balanced, which is usually a good indicator of consistent breath flow and consistent support of that breath flow. So, I mean, you already have that on your side with your technique if your breath is going to be working for you in that way. And you kind of can't force a really well balanced vibrato sound if those two things aren't on board with the activity. You kind of need them. They're important if you want that balanced vibrato. But in addition to that sort of inference on the breathing and support as a result of hearing how balanced his vibrato is, the color that he was getting out of his sound in the beginning kind of actually reminded me more of some of the vowel and color choices that a classical singer might make. So I would be curious to know what his vocal education has been like. And if your power lower in the range is coming more from the way in which your harmonics and those formants are interacting, you're able to get an acoustically powerful sound lower down, then that's less forcing and tension you have to create at the vocal fold level. And that more relaxed larynx position tends to lead more towards something you might expect from your classical vocalist. So, I mean, of course, as he went up, his larynx started to get higher, but in all honesty, I don't feel like his larynx was going too high at all in this performance. So, his breath flow is adequate enough that his larynx doesn't feel the need to like pop out the top of his head. But also, that makes me even more curious to know if he's had classical training as part of his singing. And I'm not saying that classical training is like, the be all and end all for singing training. Absolutely not. In fact, if you try to use a purely classical technique to sing contemporary, you are going to run into some issues. But as far as shape and color goes and that larynx being really relaxed, sometimes that classical training is something that can help aid you with feeling more of that larynx sitting into the breath flow rather than hiking it right up to create these sounds. So, your training background can help. Maybe he's just someone who's never felt the need to push from here. Like he's hitting these super high notes and I don't hear strain. I don't hear pushing. I don't hear a larynx that is so high that it's under maximum tension. I hear long vocal folds that are under tension because of the note that he's singing, but the freedom of the sound he's still getting up there, larynx height, man. It almost reminds me of some of the speech level singing guidelines. If any of you know who Seth Riggs is, he created this singing teaching method called speech level singing, and it's all about trying to keep the larynx as neutral as possible. And if I'm honest, trying to keep your larynx a little more neutral is going to help a lot when it comes to belting and freedom of sound, because if that larynx gets too high, you're going to run into some serious tension issues and you're not going to get the color that you want out of your sound if that larynx is too high. Damn it, I went on another tangent. Anyways, that is probably where I'm going to leave that one today. This was amazing. I believe the name I read when I did a quick wiki of Queensryche was that this vocalist is Geoff Tate. So I would love to hear some more from him because that was really enjoyable and honestly really delightful to hear how free he was able to make some of these sounds, which, you know, would be intimidating for most singers. Anyways, that is it for me today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you did, be sure to give it a like, click the subscribe button and the bell notification beside it for more just like this one. As usual, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you are staying healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye. Here we are. Today I'll be whacked. I will be whacked. Move the hair on either sides of the ears. Ooh. That's the secret, guys.